Hi, I'm Kaelen. My family didn't just reject me, they erased me. When I became a divorced single mom, they held a meeting to divide everything, and didn't even tell me it was happening. Then they sold the family house my father promised to all of us, but I only found out after they cashed the check. So I took my kids and moved into a crumbling house no one wanted. But what we found inside that fireplace, it changed everything, and exposed the lie they'd built their whole life around. Before we dive in, what time are you listening and where from? Drop a comment. I read every single one. The rain had soaked through the box by the time I reached the porch. My fingers were numb, not from the cold, but from how fast everything had changed. I looked at the house, sagging porch, broken step, windows like blind eyes, and a door that tilted in its frame like it had long given up on standing straight. Behind me, Jasper huffed as he dragged a duffel bag up the steps. "Is this really it?" he asked, blinking rain from his lashes. Livy clung to her soaked, stuffed rabbit, the one thing she wouldn't pack away. I crouched beside her and whispered, "It's not much, but it's ours." I didn't say the rest, because I had nowhere else left to go. Just 3 weeks ago, I was still someone's wife, still pretending I belonged at the family table. But that illusion shattered faster than I expected. It started with a brunch. Mom had arranged it just for the girls. I showed up in a clean sweater and fake hope. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. The sideways glance Celine gave me, the too tight smile from Zinnia. I was seated at the kids' table with my 2 children, shoved into a corner by the patio doors. Meanwhile, my sisters sipped Chardonnay and shared inside jokes at the main table with Mom. I kept pretending I didn't care, until I heard Celine's voice float back, soft but sharp. She's not even really family anymore. She couldn't even hold her marriage together. It hit harder than I'd expected. I looked at my son across the table, digging into scrambled eggs like nothing was wrong, and felt something crack. Later, when no one noticed I'd slipped away, I crept up to the attic, dust dancing in beams of sun that barely reached the corners. I knew exactly where it was. A china teacup, floral and fine, wrapped in a dishcloth I had hidden as a teenager. It had belonged to Grandma Elise, the only person who ever said to me, "You deserve a place that sees you." I cradled it in my palms like a secret. It was the only part of that house I would take with me. That night, I got the email, forwarded from a cousin who didn't know I was in the dark. It was a legal confirmation. The lake house, Dad's pride, the place we were promised we'd all share, had been sold, already closed, already paid. The buyer's check long deposited. My name? Not on a single form. I sat on my bed, kids asleep, and stared at that email until the screen dimmed. Then I stood, walked to the closet, and started pulling out suitcases. Not one word to my mother. Not to Celine, not to Zinnia. They knew what they did. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching me bleed. Now, here I was, on this porch, holding everything I had left in one wet cardboard box. I slid the old key into the lock. Click. The door creaked open like it hadn't moved in decades. Inside, the air smelled of rot, mildew, and something sweeter, older, like memories that didn't belong to me. I stepped inside, dropped the box, and wiped my shoes on the doormat someone had left behind. Home sweet home. Livy wandered in behind me. "Are we gonna live here forever?" "Just long enough to fix it," I said, even though I didn't know what that meant yet. Jasper stepped in, holding the flashlight we'd brought from the car. He scanned the room, then turned toward the stone fireplace. "Mom," he said, voice low. I turned. "There's something in the fireplace." I walked slowly toward the fireplace, brushing past Jasper. "Stay back, honey," I murmured. He nodded and took a cautious step behind Livy, who was still clutching her rabbit, staring with wide eyes. The hearth was thick with soot, the kind that felt like it had been sitting untouched for decades. I knelt, bracing my hand on the cold brick, and reached in. At first, I thought it was just more debris, burnt logs, maybe some old papers, but then my fingers tapped against metal, something small, square. I pulled it out with both hands, a rusted tin box coated with ash. It wasn't locked. I eased the lid open. Inside were 7 letters. The ink was smudged in some places, the edges browned by time. Each envelope was addressed in delicate, looping handwriting that punched the breath right out of me. To Kaelen, for when you're ready. All signed with a single name, Grandma Marigold. I sat down on the bare wooden floor, not caring about the dust or the way my jeans clung to my wet knees. With trembling fingers, I lifted the top envelope. A small dried violet was clipped to the corner. I recognized it. She used to press them into books, saying, "A flower lasts longer when it's loved quietly." I opened the letter. "Happy 25th, my sweet girl. If your mother still refuses to give you what's yours, don't give up. The lake house is meant to be your sanctuary, not your exile. Don't let them take it from you." I stared at those words until they blurred. The rain outside thudded harder on the roof, or maybe that was just my heartbeat. All this time, I thought I was the only one who saw how I was treated differently, thought I'd made it up, overreacted. But here it was. Proof. She saw it too. I read the second letter next, and that's when my fingers froze. Inside was a photocopy, a grainy, scanned version of what looked like a legal document, an early draft of my grandmother's will. I scanned the lines, my eyes darting over the formal language. I, Marigold Whitley, leave the lakefront property located at... And then, there it was, clear as day. To my granddaughter, Kaelen Whitley Grant. No mention of Celine, no shared ownership, just my name, alone. But that's not what the final will had said. I remembered the week after Grandma passed. Mom had arranged the service fast, too fast. She told me not to worry about the logistics and kept handing me my kids like they were shields to distract me. I didn't see the final will. I never even thought to ask. And now? This. I looked down at the letters spread across my lap, each one a tiny wound and a balm all at once. In one stroke, my mother and sisters had erased me, not just from a room, but from a legacy. But Grandma hadn't forgotten. She'd written these words to me, for me, and someone had hidden them here, deliberately. I didn't cry. I gathered the letters, tucked them back into the metal box, and stood. Jasper was watching me. He didn't ask what I found. He just said, "Are we still staying here?" I nodded. "Yeah, we are." That night, after the kids were asleep on the mattress we dragged into the living room, I sat near the fireplace again, alone. I whispered into the dark. They erased me, but Grandma saw me, and now I see them. Morning crept through the broken blinds, casting pale strips of light across the living room floor. I hadn't slept. The letters were still on the table, sealed again, but my mind kept replaying the same sentence like a quiet drumbeat. She meant for me to have it. I wandered into the back room while the kids were eating dry cereal from paper bowls. I was looking for light bulbs, maybe a screwdriver, anything that made this place feel less like a ghost's attic and more like a home. I pushed open a narrow utility closet wedged behind the hallway door and started rummaging through old paint cans, brittle scrub brushes, rusted hinges. That's when I found the photo. It was behind a roll of plastic tarp, the frame cracked on one side, buried beneath years of grime. I wiped it clean with the edge of my shirt. It was us, my family. Taken maybe 8 years ago at the lake house. Everyone was there. My mother in her pale blue cardigan, Celine with her usual practice smile, Zinnia cradling her infant son. And there I was too. Or rather, there I should have been. My spot, far left, was scratched out. Not torn, not faded, but scratched. With purpose. The outline of my dress was still visible, a hand on someone's shoulder. But my face had been gouged out of the print. I just stood there, holding the frame, wondering how long it had sat there like this, out of sight, just like me. The smell of burnt toast pulled me back. I leaned the photo against the counter, washed my hands, and poured myself a mug of lukewarm coffee. But my head was already somewhere else, years back. I remembered the neighborhood BBQ, the first summer after my divorce. I hadn't told many people why we'd split. It wasn't their business. And honestly, I was still too shell-shocked to explain anything clearly. But Mom? I walked up behind her as she chatted with some of the church ladies and heard her say, "Kaelen's not well right now. We've tried everything to help her." a hand on her heart, a tilt of the head. I remember standing there in my own backyard, holding a tray of cupcakes Livy had frosted, while a woman I barely knew nodded solemnly and said, "Poor thing, I hope she gets the help she needs." And just like that, I became a rumor. A few days later, a client I'd been freelancing for emailed to say the project was canceled. Just concerns around availability, they said. But the timing stung. Calls stopped coming in. Invites dried up. I wasn't unstable, I was discarded. I finished my coffee and went back for the photo. Stared at it for a long minute. No, this wasn't neglect. This was active erasure. Strategic silence. They didn't want to fix things. They wanted me gone, without the mess of a fight, without accountability. They didn't want me back. They wanted me erased quietly. Celine's voice popped into my head. Not from a specific day, just one of her many rehearsed lectures. "You always make things messy, Kaelen. Why can't you just let Mom take care of the narrative?" The narrative. They didn't lie by accident. They lied well, with polish, with precision. They painted me as a burden so no one would ever ask what they did. I grabbed a pen and a torn piece of notepad, wrote one sentence, folded it once, then again, and slid it behind the warped frame. They told the world I was broken so no one would ask who broke me. Then I returned the photo to where I found it, not to hide it, but to mark the truth in the same place they tried to bury the lie. The note I left behind the photo stayed with me long after I closed the closet door. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a truth I'd hidden from myself for too long, but now that it was out, I couldn't unsee it, and maybe I didn't want to. The next morning, I forced myself back into town. We needed supplies. The water heater groaned like it was 90 years old, which it probably was, and the front door still stuck in the frame. I figured a new wrench and a roll of weather stripping might be a good place to start. Jasper was at school, Livy with the neighbor's teen daughter down the road, and I had about 2 hours before pickup. It felt strange to walk around freely again, without glances tracking my every step, until I reached the sidewalk in front of the hardware store. A pair of women leaned against the window display talking low. When they saw me, one of them turned, the other looked away too quickly. I gave a tight nod, kept walking. I'd grown familiar with that twitch in people's eyes, a mix of pity and something uglier. Not curiosity, containment, like they'd all been handed the same script about me and didn't know how to improvise if I walked on stage. Inside, I grabbed a small cart and moved through the aisles mechanically. Tape, nails, work gloves. It was almost peaceful in the back section until I heard the door chime again and a slow shuffle behind me. "Kaelen?" I turned. Mr. Adler. He hadn't changed much. Thinner, maybe, a little more hunched, but the same wiry white hair and kind, unsure eyes. He was my father's friend, a retired architect who used to come by the lake house in the summers, sipping sweet tea with Dad over blueprints spread across the picnic table. "Mr. Adler?" I said gently. I wasn't sure it was you," he murmured, stepping closer. His voice carried hesitation. "I heard you were back. Didn't want to pry." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak yet. He cleared his throat, fiddling with a folded receipt in his fingers. "I don't want to stir anything up," he began. "But I saw what they did to you, back then, and I said nothing. That's on me." My brows furrowed. "What do you mean?" He glanced around, then motioned toward the parking lot. "Can you... just a minute?" We walked out together. He led me to his truck, parked under a tree with peeling bark. From the back seat, he pulled out a dusty black tube and handed it to me. "I was supposed to throw this out," he said. "Your mother brought it over years ago, said it was hers and she didn't want it cluttering the place. But I couldn't. I knew." I unscrewed the cap. Inside was a large, worn blueprint, thicker paper, yellowed at the edges. I unrolled it slowly on the hood of the truck. The title block had her name typed neatly, but as my eyes scanned the margins, I saw it. My handwriting. Notes in pencil, measurements in my shorthand, even my name initialed in the corner. "Your father gave this to me when you were 17, Mr. Adler said. Told me the idea came from you two. Some kind of retreat center. For women starting over. He said it was your dream." I traced a faint pencil line with my fingertip. My chest tightened. He told me you were the only one who saw what was missing in that family, Mr. Adler continued. He said you were the one who'd build something better. I remembered that summer, sitting on the floor in our basement, sketching cabins, imagining shared kitchens and quiet porches where women could feel safe again. My father encouraged it. My mother, not so much. Helping broken women just means you stay broken too, she'd snapped once when she saw our sketches. You're too soft, Kaelen, just like your grandmother. Looking at the blueprint now, I realized they didn't just erase me from stories. They erased me from purpose, from legacy. They used my ideas, my vision, and rewrote history to make them theirs. Mr. Adler placed a hand on the blueprint's edge. I'm sorry I stayed silent. I rolled it back up slowly, tucking it under my arm like something fragile that had survived a fire. It's okay, I said, though it wasn't. You didn't bury it. That's more than I can say for most. He gave a quiet nod, then stepped back into the truck and drove off. I stood there for a long moment before walking back to my car. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. But something had settled in me. A shift. She'd erased me from the legacy I helped build, so I began laying a new foundation. Quietly. I left Mr. Adler's truck that day with the blueprint hugged tight against my chest. The wind picked up as I walked back to my car, but the chill didn't touch me. Something in me had shifted, quietly, decisively. Not out of anger, out of truth, and I wasn't about to bury it again. 2 days later, an invitation arrived taped to my front door. A childish dinosaur sticker clung to the corner of the envelope, covering a smudge. My nephew's 6th birthday. The party would be held at the house I used to scrub floors in, hang curtains in. Half mine, though you'd never know it now. For a long minute, I stared at the card. I didn't want to go. My gut said no. But I did anyway. Not for them. For the boy who once called me his favorite aunt. And for closure, if that's what people called walking into a fire you knew would burn you again. Just so you'd remember how hot it really was. The day of the party, I parked down the block, hands still on the steering wheel even after the engine cut. The lawn was manicured to perfection, new paint, patio lights already glowing, even though the sun was still up. That house used to creak and sigh with memory. Now it looked like a showroom, everything polished, everything pretending. I walked up the driveway carrying a box I'd spent 2 nights sanding, staining, and carving. Inside was a handcrafted wooden toy garage, complete with tiny tools and a ramp Jasper helped me design. When Vera opened the door, her smile tightened like a drawstring bag. "Look who made it," she said too brightly. I nodded once. "Where should I put this?" "Oh, somewhere. I'll figure it out." I found the birthday boy, gave him the box, and his eyes lit up. He ran to show his friends, and for a moment, I let myself breathe, until the cake came out. Everyone gathered in the backyard, clustered around the long table under strings of fairy lights. Vera clinked her glass. "I just want to say," she began, swaying slightly in her heels, "how grateful I am for family, real family, the kind that sticks around, the kind that doesn't fall apart when things get hard." A few guests laughed softly. I looked down. And a special thank you to those of us who still believe in commitment. Not everyone gets to bring a +1 these days. "Oh, wait," she tilted her glass toward me. "Never mind." That landed. A ripple of muffled snickers. One woman choked on her Prosecco. Celine turned her face away, pretending not to notice. I stood slowly. The scraping of the chair legs cut through the air louder than the music in the background. My voice was even, not loud, not shaky. "I may not be married anymore," I said, "but I still know what's mine." Vera blinked, her glass frozen midair. "And you know what I'm talking about," I added, eyes locked on hers. 1 week. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. A few guests stared between us like they'd walked into the middle of a scene they weren't supposed to see. Our mother shifted uncomfortably near the bar cart. No one moved. I didn't wait for anyone to catch up. I turned, walked back through the house, heels tapping against the new wood floors she probably had installed just to erase my footprints. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice, but every step out of that house felt like a stake planted in new soil. Not this time. No silence, No more erasing. She thought I was bluffing. She didn't know I had already spoken to the county clerk. I drove to the county courthouse early that Monday, hours before the office opened, sitting in my car with the envelope on my lap like it might vanish if I let it out of sight. Inside was my late Aunt Doris's trust clause, one she'd quietly amended 5 years ago. A clause no one had bothered to look for, because no one thought I mattered enough to be written into anything. When the doors opened, I was first in line. The clerk, a kind-eyed man named Reginald, walked me through the filing process. "It'll go to legal review," he said, flipping through the notarized pages, "but it's valid. Most people forget about trust-embedded ownership clauses. Lucky you found it." It wasn't luck. It was survival. By noon, the claim was officially in motion. They had no idea yet, but that house, the one with the newly paved driveway and the wine fridge Vera had installed, was now under legal dispute. 2 days later, they found out. I was restocking shelves at the local library when the double glass doors swung open hard enough to rattle the donation jar. Vera marched in like a courtroom scene in stilettos. Behind her, our mother trailed close, lips tight, eyes flicking from left to right like she was looking for an exit. "You think this is funny?" Vera snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice the quiet. I kept my hand on the spine of a book I hadn't shelved yet. "Excuse me?" "The house. The filing. You're trying to steal it out from under us just because your marriage didn't work out?" I glanced around. 3 patrons pretended to be deeply fascinated by the magazine rack. I pulled a copy of the trust clause from my bag and handed it over. "This was filed last week. Aunt Doris made sure I had a fallback. Turns out she knew how this family operated." Mom flinched slightly at that. Vera barely read it before tossing it on the counter. "This doesn't mean anything," came a voice from behind them. Bryce, Vera's husband. He sauntered in with a smirk that curled like smoke. "You think a dusty piece of paper changes the fact we've been maintaining that house for years? Remodeling it? Paying the taxes? Living in it?" "It's funny," I said, voice even, "how generous you all got after the deed was lost. Especially since that dusty paper proves I was legally entitled to it from the beginning." Bryce chuckled. "This'll never hold up." I tilted my head. "Depends who you're trying to impress, your backyard friends or the judge." A silence fell, the kind that pulls everything down with it. Mom finally stepped forward, voice low but sharp. "You're tearing this family apart, Kaelen." I looked at her, really looked, the way she clutched her purse strap, the way her earrings still matched her shoes, even on a day like this. "No," I said. "You tore it apart the moment you started editing your own daughter out of the truth, the moment you decided a prettier story was worth more than me." Vera looked away. Bryce scoffed and turned on his heel, but Mom just stood there, rooted, as if my words had sunk somewhere deeper than she was ready to acknowledge. They left without saying another word. The library door closed behind them like punctuation. That night, I sat on the front steps of my new, temporary house, watching Livy draw chalk hearts on the sidewalk. Jasper was inside, reading. For the first time in a long while, my hands weren't shaking. This wasn't about winning. It was about being seen, on record, in ink. They still thought I wouldn't go all the way, until the court summons arrived. And even then, I imagine they assumed it was a bluff in a different envelope. It was a cool Tuesday morning, the kind where the fog rolls in low across the fields, and everything feels suspended in breath. I didn't see it happen, but I didn't need to. Vera told me everything without knowing she had. I'd parked 2 streets over, just far enough to keep eyes off me, and waited. At exactly 10:03 a.m., the process server made his way up the steps of the house I once called home. He knocked once, then twice. I saw the curtain shift. A moment later, Vera cracked the door open, eyes squinting, arms folded. I watched her lips move. "Yes?" He handed her a thick envelope, nodded politely, and turned away before she could close the door on his back. From my vantage point, I saw it all. The way her body locked up, the rigid grip on the envelope, the slow, deliberate read of the name printed across it. I could almost hear her breath catch when she realized what it was. My mother appeared behind her, clutching a mug of coffee like it could warm whatever part of her had just gone cold. "What did she do now?" she asked. Her voice floated down the porch like a tired wind. "She sued us," Vera muttered. They stood there, not speaking, not shouting, just frozen. That silence? It had more weight than every insult they'd hurled at me over the years. That evening, as I later learned from my cousin's offhanded texts, dinner was held in a tension so thick it could have been cut with one of Mom's antique butter knives. Nobody touched the roast chicken. No one passed the rolls. Kaelen's name wasn't mentioned, but she was there, between every glance, in every sharp sigh, every clink of silverware against china. Back at my place, the air was just as still, but it didn't suffocate. It steadied me. That night, I got a message I wasn't expecting. From Mrs. Langley, our elderly neighbor from 3 doors down. I'd helped her 2 winters ago when her heater went out. Never asked for anything, never even told her how things were unraveling. But she remembered, and she wrote, "I know what they did, Kaelen. If it helps, I'll tell it under oath." My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I read it again. And again. Her words sliced through the quiet like a bell in a monastery. Suddenly, a memory rushed in. Me, 17, crouched next to the garden bed, planting zinnias beside Vera. I remember how she laughed. "You and your pathetic little dream house," she'd sneered. "You think owning a cottage makes you whole again?" Mom had chuckled too, not with cruelty, but that tight-lipped approval that always came when Vera knocked me down a notch. I didn't defend myself that day. I just dug deeper. Tonight I sat on my own porch, dusk painting long shadows across the yard. On my lap, the manila folder holding everything I had left to prove. I opened it to review the contents. The trust clause, the deed copy, the legal papers. And there, at the bottom, nestled between pages, was the broken ceramic dove I'd found during move-in. Still chipped, still cracked. I hadn't meant to keep it, but somehow I had. I ran my thumb over its jagged edge, not to feel pain, but to remember what had been shattered. They broke me. But this is the glue. The courtroom was colder than I imagined, but my voice didn't tremble once. My boots echoed too loudly as I stepped across the polished floor, past strangers in suits, and family I once called mine. Vera was already there, sitting next to her attorney with a smile too stiff to be real. Our mother sat a row behind her, gaze fixed on the floor like she'd dropped something and couldn't bring herself to pick it up. I didn't wear anything fancy, just a dark blue blouse and a blazer that still smelled faintly of old cedar. I didn't come to impress. I came to be seen. Really seen. The judge, an older woman with tired eyes and a voice like iron wrapped in velvet, nodded to both counsels. "Let's begin." Vera's attorney went first. He stood tall, voice slick with practiced charm, and held up a folder full of papers like he was about to unveil the Constitution. "These receipts show that my client, Vera Marchand, funded and oversaw the majority of the renovations on the disputed property. My client invested not just money, but vision and care in restoring a structure that would have otherwise collapsed." He clicked the remote, and images of polished hardwood floors, a redone kitchen, and garden stonework appeared on the projector. For a moment, it looked damning. Then my attorney rose, quiet, methodical, and prepared. He clicked again. Side-by-side comparisons appeared. On one side, the receipts Vera had submitted. On the other, bank records, contractor logs, time-stamped transfers from my personal account to every vendor Vera claimed she'd paid. "Your Honor," he said gently, "not only did Miss Kaelen Everett fund these renovations herself, but the documents submitted by the defendant were altered. The originals, obtained directly from the contractors, show no trace of Miss Vera Marchand's name or payment." There was a rustle in the courtroom, papers shifting, throats cleared. Vera crossed her arms, lips pressed thin. Her mother still didn't look up. "And there's more," my attorney added, inserting a USB into the court's monitor system. The video that played was grainy, likely from a motion-activated porch cam left running without their knowledge. I remembered when we retrieved it. Mrs. Langley had handed it to me with a quiet, firm nod. In the footage, Vera stood at the kitchen counter, laughing as she held a clipboard. "She's too dumb to even know we're stealing her name off the deed," she joked. The camera caught my mother in the background, sipping tea, nodding silently. The room chilled further. My stomach clenched, but I didn't flinch. The judge took a moment before looking up. "Miss Everett," she said, "you may offer closing remarks." I stood slowly, steadying my breath. My hand found the folder I'd brought with me, and from it, I pulled the small, broken ceramic dove. The room watched as I held it up, as if it held more weight than any affidavit. "This was in the attic when I returned," I said. "Everything else, my name, my share, my place in this family, was torn down, repainted, or signed away. But this?" I turned it slowly, letting the fractured wing glint in the light. "This was left behind. Maybe because it was broken, or maybe because they thought it wasn't worth hiding." I took a breath. "But I kept it, because it reminds me of who I was before they tried to erase me, before they decided I was the problem." I set it gently on the desk before me. No more words were needed. The room was silent. Even Vera had nothing to say. Outside, rain tapped lightly against the windows. The verdict came on a rainy afternoon. But it wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming what they tried to steal. I walked out of the courthouse without looking back, the judge's ruling still echoing in my ears. Full title transfer, public retraction, damages awarded for defamation and fraud, and with it, my name, my dignity, my home. Behind me, Vera shoved open the heavy doors and stormed down the courthouse steps, heels clapping against the wet concrete like a tantrum trying to be taken seriously. Her lawyer trailed quietly. Mom stood off to the side, clutching her purse like it could hold back the weight of everything she'd chosen not to say for years. She opened her mouth, maybe to explain, maybe to beg, but I didn't stop walking, not out of spite, just peace. That was the final thread, and it didn't need to be tied. 2 days later, I pulled into the gravel driveway of the house they once tried to pretend I didn't belong in. It looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just grown. Livy was the first to hop out of the car. Her backpack swung behind her like she was running into a vacation rental, not a house with layers of pain packed into every corner. "Mom," she called, "can we repaint the hallway purple?" "Sure," I said, smiling. "Pick the shade. Jasper can pick the trim." He gave me a look, half eye roll, half grin, but followed his sister inside. The floors creaked the same. The light filtered through the east-facing windows the same. But the feeling, that was different. This time we had keys nobody else could take. This time our names were on every doorframe. I spent the next week quietly arranging what mattered. Most of the furniture had been replaced. Vera had stripped it all out before the case, as if removing chairs and rugs could erase memories. She couldn't. What was left was mine. The settlement check arrived in the mail on a Monday, neat, sterile, absurdly large. I stared at it for a while before tucking it into a folder labeled Rebuild. By Friday, it had a destination, a non-profit in town that worked with women starting over. I sat across from the director, slid the check across the table, and said only, "Use it to build spaces that don't get stolen out from under people." They asked if I wanted a name on the donor wall. I nodded. Kaelen Rowe, survivor, builder, mother. That evening, the ceramic dove sat in the kitchen windowsill, its wing repaired with the smallest line of gold resin, barely visible unless you knew where to look. It caught the golden hour light like it had waited for it all this time. Jasper curled next to me on the couch, head resting on my arm. Livy was already asleep, her purple hallway paint chips scattered on the coffee table. "It's good to have a house again," he said softly. I kissed his forehead. "It's good to have a home," I whispered back. Outside, the rain had stopped. The wind smelled like earth and change.